I used to think that most marital issues cropped up within the first decade of marriage. You know, the honeymoon phase ends, and the real work begins. But as it turns out, marriage is a lifelong journey full of surprises. When two people come together to share a life and raise a family, they bring their own visions of what that life should look like. Some might imagine a partnership mirroring their parents' relationship, while others take cues from movies, books, or even the seemingly perfect lives of friends or neighbors. What I didn't realize back then was that even a union of 40 years, complete with grandchildren and decades of shared memories, could still face a breaking point. The idea of separation after so much time together seemed absurd to me, until life taught me otherwise. Let me share a bit of my own story. Patricia and I tied the knot when we were still students, figuring life out as we went along. I managed to finish my degree while Patricia took a year off and later completed her studies through a correspondence course. That's how we eventually graduated, juggling responsibilities along the way. I still remember those early days, me holding the tiny hand of our 3-year-old son, Ryan, and then, 2 years later, welcoming our daughter into the family. At the time, I had joined the Army and quickly realized it was the right career for me. So we packed up our lives and moved wherever duty called, crisscrossing the country and enduring long stretches apart when I was deployed overseas. Through it all, Patricia rarely voiced any frustrations. Maybe it was because I always made sure to provide for the family financially. My job was no walk in the park, though. I was injured twice in the line of duty and spent months recovering in hospitals. The final straw came when a piece of shrapnel lodged in my back, forcing me to leave the military behind and settle into civilian life. I thought life without danger and unpredictability would be simpler, but I quickly learned that even a quiet, normal life has its own hurdles to overcome. Luckily, my education, military discipline, and sheer determination helped me adapt to these changes. I threw myself into my work with focus and grit, and over time, it paid off. 6 years into my new career, I had accomplished more than I'd hoped for: steady promotions, a great position, and eventually becoming a co-owner of the company. Financially, our family was set. But Patricia had ambitions of her own. After her maternity leave, she started working part-time at a pharmacy. When the kids were older, we finally put down roots in one place, and Patricia decided to dive into her career. She joined a pharmaceutical company, climbed the corporate ladder, and within a few years was heading their marketing department. It's been over a decade now, and Patricia has built an incredible reputation for herself. She's driven, meticulous, and fully committed to her work. Though she has a capable team at her side, Patricia prefers to personally handle critical tasks. Whenever I asked why, she'd smile and say, "This way, I can be certain it's done right." She trusts her team's skills, but understands that everyone has their quirks, and in her line of work, important projects or big trips require a delicate balance. Watching her juggle it all is nothing short of inspiring. She's a master at keeping everything in harmony. They say happiness keeps a woman's beauty alive, and Patricia is living proof. At 50, she glows with energy and vitality, radiating confidence and joy. Honestly, if I didn't know her age, I'd never guess it. She's a force to be reckoned with, and I couldn't be prouder. She looked absolutely radiant, always making her health and fitness a priority. Her dedication and the ease with which she faced challenges were things I deeply admired. It hit me then. She had endured just as much as I had, if not more, while raising 2 young kids and waiting for me during my lengthy deployments. Now, finally, she was chasing the dreams she'd nurtured since her college days. How could I possibly grumble about her frequent business trips? She even made a point to call every evening, her voice brimming with affection, as she reminded me how much she missed me. I remember one particular time when I was entrusted with a critical task at work. We had to secure a pivotal agreement for the supply of raw materials. After countless negotiations and an endless stream of emails, the matter required my personal presence to seal the deal. I packed my bags and set off, ready to finalize every last detail. By sheer coincidence, Patricia happened to be on a business trip as well, both of us in Florida, of all places. I couldn't resist the idea of surprising her. Without a word to my ever-efficient assistant, I decided to wrap up my work and carve out a couple of extra days to spend with her. With two bulky folders in hand, I stepped into the CEO's office, prepared for hours of deep discussions. True to form, we spent over 4 intense hours scrutinizing every detail, flipping through page after page, hashing out specifics until every corner of the deal was airtight. By the end of the day, things couldn't have gone better. We shook hands, finalized the paperwork, and wrapped up what felt like a marathon negotiation. The CEO, visibly pleased, suggested we unwind a bit. He invited me to join him for a relaxing evening at his country house. With a warm smile, he promised his secretary would take care of the logistics and casually mentioned that everything was already set for a fantastic dinner. During the ride, he opened up a bit more. In a quieter tone, he shared that his life had been shaped by loss and resilience. The mother of his 2 sons had passed away 14 years ago, and for the past 5 years, he had been in a steady relationship with a woman he described as his common-law wife. They hadn't formalized things, a choice she often dismissed by saying, "We're not kids anymore." Their biggest hurdle was her frequent travel for work. She was often away for months. Still, each reunion felt as exhilarating as their first. Then, in a conspiratorial tone, he mentioned there was a surprise waiting at his colleague's Florida home. I couldn't have imagined what lay ahead, but nothing could have prepared me for the shock that awaited. We pulled up to a magnificent garden, its perfectly paved path leading to a grand door. The CEO rang the bell, and it swung open almost immediately. A woman stood in the doorway, elegant and poised, as he introduced her as his wife. My attention was briefly diverted by a phone call, and I turned towards the house only to be jolted by a sharp, piercing scream. Chaos unfolded in an instant. The woman had collapsed onto the floor, and the CEO, along with 2 other men, rushed to her side. What I'd just witnessed felt more surreal than seeing a dinosaur come to life. I felt a surge of fear, even though I didn't know this woman. Still, I couldn't help but feel a deep sympathy for her. As I approached to offer help, I finally saw her face, hidden behind the men who were crowding around her. My heart dropped when I realized it was my wife lying unconscious in the hallway. But that wasn't the worst part. The shocking truth hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just my wife, but also his. I had always assumed Patricia was in town for business, staying at the company's apartment and hopping between pharmacies and other pharmaceutical firms. I couldn't have been more wrong. What I didn't know was that she had been leading a double life. She'd spend a few months with me and then disappear for the same amount of time to be with her director from Florida. When she saw me standing there, her shock was so intense that she fainted. I couldn't help but wonder, had she even told him about me? But before I could get lost in that thought, the weight of the moment snapped me back to reality. I quickly made some excuse, turned on my heel, and left. I couldn't answer her calls. I didn't know how to confront her about the lies, the betrayal, or the utter disregard for our marriage. After 40 years, how was I supposed to accept that I had been nothing more than a backup plan, a fool in a long-running con? Even before the divorce was finalized, she tried to explain herself. She begged for forgiveness, claimed I had misunderstood everything, but I couldn't bear to listen to her apologies anymore. Since then, we've never spoken again. I don't want to know where she is or who she's with. Part of me wonders if her second husband will take her back now. Maybe she'll settle for some sort of formality, something she couldn't afford to commit to before. Despite all of this, Patricia still maintains a connection with our children and grandchildren. They're too scared to tell me about her affairs, afraid of causing more pain. I try to tell myself that one day I'll be able to hear her name or look at her picture without feeling a shiver down my spine. But that day seems so far away. I never imagined that the life I'd spent 4 decades building, what I thought was an unshakable fortress, would crumble so completely. And yet, here I am.